We've now covered all of our properties for the emitters. Now in this video what we're going to do is we're going to start taking a look at the Particle Animator, specifically at the color animation settings available in the Particle Emitter, or Particle Animator. Why do those two words sound so much alike? I'm going to go underneath Game Object, go to Create Other, and just create a particle system straight from there. And really that's just a way to save time. At this point, if you've been watching all these videos, you've already seen how to go about creating one of these from scratch by making an empty game object and slapping on your emitter and your animator and your renderer. So now we'll just go ahead and let Unity do the hard work for us. If we jump down underneath the Particle Animator, we have some properties at the very beginning that allow us to control the change in the particle's color and alpha transparency over its lifetime.
Right. If you remember back to the initial intro video, we stated that the animator's job is to change parameters over time. One of those main principles is changing its color and its transparency over time.
That's right. Now I've got a widescreen view here, and even though I generally like to see my particles going upward, I'm going to buckle just to make the most of my screen space here, and we'll take our local velocity X, and I'll set this to 1. And let's just see how far those particles stretch across my screen. That's pretty good, but let's say we take our energy, which is currently set to 3, and let's double that to 6 by 6, and that should get the particles pretty much all the way across my screen. Now, the important thing to note is that these color and alpha properties are dependent on the lifetime of the particle. They have nothing to do with seconds or, are you going to shift from blue to green over 3 or 5 seconds. It's all about lifetime. Color animation 0, this color swatch, is what is applied, the color that is applied at the birth of the particle. Animation 4, or the fifth one because it's 0 based, is the color at time of death.
Right.
And so as if one particle lives for shorter than another, then he's going to transition through all these colors much more quickly than his longer living counterpart.
Right. If you look at the color swatches in the inspector, you'll see a little black bar underneath the white swatch. Might be hard to see depending on the resolution you're watching it at. But the very first one, 0, has just a little bit of white and it's mostly black. That means at the birth of the particle, it's mostly transparent. And if you look at the left in the scene view, you can see as the particles come in, they're very, very transparent. And they become more opaque about halfway through life, and at the very end, they start fading out again. These are all controlled by the bottom part of the color swatches.
Now I'm going to try something real quick. What if I was to grab an empty game object, and then I parent my particle system to that, and then click on my game object and have that selected. I thought that would work. It just allows me to see the particles without seeing those pesky blue polygon lines in the way. So this really allows us to much more clearly see that fade in, where we have that low alpha at the beginning of our particle system. Now, what I can do is I can select my particle system, and then come up here to the inspector and lock my inspector in the upper right-hand corner, little tiny padlock icon, and then come up here to the game object, and that'll hide all that out. Hit Q, and that'll now hide away my my gizmo. So now all we see is the moving particles, which will make a lot of this a lot easier to see. Now, something I'm going to do just kind of for the fun of it is let's take the size of these particles and double them. Just make them a lot bigger. Now, again, you see that we're fading in at the time of birth, we're fading out at the time of death, and let's talk a little bit more about that. Down here inside our Particle Animator, our very first property is does animate color. If we check this out, or check it off, switch it off, uncheck it, however you want to call that, notice we're no longer fading. We're popping into existence at full alpha transparency and popping out straight down to 0. If you want these values that are applied here by default to actually be applied, you have to make sure that this is checked. Now, let's click on each one of these and just take a look. Now, by default, these are all set to white, and they have an alpha that is already set up with 0 having 10%, and then we jump over to I'm sorry, it's not 10%. It's 0 to 255 value. So the first one being 10, which is very close to black, very close to nothing. And then we go to 180, which is about 75%. And then we go to 255, which is 100%. Then back down to 180, again 75%, and then back down to 10, which is very close to 0. And that's how we define that fade in and fade out behavior. If we were to change this, just for the fun of it, like say we grab 2, which is right in the middle, and we pull it back down, and get our color picker out of the way. In fact, let's pull it all the way down to 0. Our particles, if you look really closely, are fading out almost to non-existence right here in the middle of their life. Just showing you kind of how that works. Now, we're going to go ahead and leave this cranked all the way up to 255. So we just have our fade in and fade out. We're just really going to focus on color. So let's start off here with our color animation 0, and let's start with red. And over here, you see when the particles are first born, they are indeed red in color. And then we'll take the next color and we'll make that a shade of yellow. And you see how we're actually shifting through the spectrum. We're going from red through orange all the way to yellow, and then it's just going right back out to white. So I'll grab the next one and we'll make that green. You see how we continue, and you can see where we're going. So we'll make this shade of blue, and our final one we'll make a purple. And you see how over the life of the particles we're shifting over that spectrum. Now, to really kind of drive home the whole lifespan thing, let's take our min and max energy. We'll go ahead and leave max at 6, but we're going to take our min energy. In fact, let's boost this up because we're going to need to help our random range out a little bit. We'll take our min and set this down to 1. And if you look really closely, though, it can be a little tricky to see. We're starting to get some purples and all kinds of different colors way back here really early on. And that's because we have some particles which are dying off very early. So they've got to transition through this entire rainbow of colors before they die. So if you're looking to get some variation, you can see how that would help there. Now, how is this useful? Because obviously, you're not just going to make rainbow particles, though it is pretty cool. Now all we need is a unicorn to run through our scene, and we have the perfect game already. But let's say you have something like fire, especially like gas fire. Gas fire is a great example because a gas fire tends to be blue at the base, and then it can become a more intense blue depending on how much gas is in it. If it really continues on and catches a lot of oxygen, it can start to turn orange over its lifespan. So that's how you can achieve that effect. You can start off with a blue at the base. Let's just do it. Let's maybe start off with something that's very close to a very pale blue, so almost white. And then we'll go to a blue. Now I'm just totally making these colors up, so I expect this to be close, but not really dead on. And then we'll shift over to orange, and then all the way to a much richer orange at the very end. Now, of course, that doesn't look very fire-like just yet. We'd have to change some other properties. And while I have no intention of trying to make this into the perfect gas fire, let's just pull our emission ellipse down to make it a whole lot smaller. We'll take our local velocity and we'll crank that up. Well, I actually meant to hit 3 and not 0.3, but that actually kind of works too. But let's say 3 here. And we would really need to kind of condense these down.
The min and max energy.
Yeah. So again, all kinds of things. Let's go ahead and maybe pull this down to just, I don't know, 1.2. And now we could use just a lot more particles, so let's go with 300 by 300. And we're already starting to get someplace. So again, just a way that you can see how that color transition can start to be useful. But that's everything I wanted to show here, was just showing how we can animate this color. That's going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.